I used to think milestones were shields. If you stack enough candles on a cake, if you fill a room with the people who share your last name, you can't possibly be blindsided. Too much light for shadows to slip through. Grandpa's 90th birthday proved me wrong. The banquet hall smelled like sugared almonds and old wood polish. Someone had ordered helium numbers so large they bowed toward the chandelier. 9 and 0, dipping like they needed to rest. My aunt and uncle floated from table to table, practicing the kind of warmth that takes rehearsal. The DJ had one job, Sinatra until speeches, then Motown, and he was determined to do it. I kept watching Grandpa's hands. Even at 90, they were the most honest things about him. Square-knuckled, a little tremor when he was tired, but still precise. Those hands built me a treehouse when I was 8 with a ladder low enough for my fear. Those hands learned how to braid my hair when my mother died because he said no girl should go to school with a crooked part. Those hands never forgot. So when my husband leaned in behind the clatter of plates and whispered, "We're leaving," it felt like the floor moved. "What?" I smiled because the camera was on us. "Ethan, what?" "Now," he said, his mouth barely moving. He wasn't pale so much as emptied out, the way a surgeon looks when the thing on the scan is the thing he hoped it wasn't. I set my champagne down. The glass rang against the table like a tiny alarm. On our way to the coat room, I saw them, the looks. My uncle's mouth tightened, my aunt's smile calcified. Cousin Becca, all gleam and lip gloss, cut her eyes toward the gift table, then away. If you've ever been erased in a room full of family, you know that silence can be louder than a microphone. I felt it gather at my back as we slipped out. In the corridor, Ethan exhaled like he'd been holding the building up. "Tell me," I said. He pinched the bridge of his nose. I went to sign the oversized card they're passing around. The pen died, so I grabbed another from the gift table. There's an envelope sitting under the guest book, addressed to Coleman and Brink Probate, and right on top was a living trust amendment with Grandpa's name. Nora, the notary stamp expired 3 years ago. My scalp prickled. Maybe it's a copy. "And the signature," he said, voice low. "Your grandpa's is steady on page 1 and steady on page 4, perfectly steady. People with tremor don't sign like a font." Behind us, someone laughed too brightly. I heard my aunt's voice. After the toast, "We'll do the announcement," and my stomach turned. What announcement? "I don't know," Ethan said. "But Becca told the lawyer we need to do this before she gets sentimental." She glanced at you, twice. "She," I repeated, my mouth going dry. "Nora," he said gently, "they're about to cut you out of the narrative and the estate in one tidy speech. We can't stop a train by standing in front of it. We need to reroute the tracks." I looked back through the glass door. Across the room, Grandpa adjusted his tie with those square hands and smiled at a child who wasn't mine, and for a second the grief arrived too early, like a storm when no one checked the forecast. "Okay," I said, "we leave." We didn't make a scene. We didn't give them what they were waiting to call dramatic. We slipped into the January night, the air colder than the marble lobby, and drove home without music, the city's lights flicking by like witnesses who didn't want to take sides. At home, Ethan pulled his laptop close, fingers moving in the clipped rhythm of a man with a map. I boiled water and didn't drink the tea. Old habit. When I'm scared, I hold warm things as if heat could weigh down what wants to float away. "I'm running the notary," he said. "Expired like I thought, deceased actually. And Coleman, the lawyer, charm-smiling next to the cannoli, he's been warned twice by the bar for documentation irregularities." I sat. The chair felt too solid for my body. "My mother," I said, and the word tasted of sugar and salt. She would have laughed at the word irregularities. Ethan looked up, softer. He met me where I lived, in the precise place between memory and strategy. My mother died when I was 8. My father had already left, so Grandpa stepped into every blank space he could find. We were a unit of 2, with my aunt and uncle tethered at a distance by obligation and optics. They visited on holidays and corrected my posture in photographs. They liked to call me practical, the way you'd call a pair of shoes sturdy when you're thanking them for not being beautiful. My mother always said wolves don't get mad when sheep say they're hungry, I murmured. "They just keep the pen locked." Ethan kept typing. "Then let's lock the pen. The amendment's date is 6 weeks after Grandpa's last hospitalization. If they're claiming he was of sound mind, we can verify it or prove he wasn't. And if anyone exploited him while he was cognitively compromised, that's elder abuse." The room seemed to lean toward that phrase, elder abuse. It fit in my mouth and did not choke me. It wasn't a curse spat in a kitchen. It was a charge with edges. I want to see him tomorrow morning, I said, early, before anyone else gets to him. Ethan closed the laptop. We go at 7. Grandpa was already awake. He always said mornings don't waste themselves on cowards, and I used to roll my eyes and shuffle in slippers to the coffee pot. Now, at 7, he sat in his chair by the window, wearing the sweatshirt I'd given him for his 88th, navy blue, because he hated gray. Gray is what you surrender to, he'd said. Blue is what you choose. When he saw me, his smile wasn't from a photograph. It was the one that belonged to me alone, the one that reached his eyes and softened the seam of his jaw. Kid, he said, you vanish from your own party. I knelt beside him and took his hand. It was warm. I had to pick up a gift, I said, and he chuckled. We talked about the cake, the music, how Sinatra makes everything feel like a second chance. Then I asked if he'd signed anything recently, for the trust, for the house, for anything official. His eyes narrowed, not suspiciously, but the way a carpenter squints at a line. Your aunt brought papers last week, he said slowly. Wanted me to tidy things up. I told her to leave them, said I'd read after my nap. When I woke up, the papers were gone, and she kissed my forehead like I'd been good. Heat crawled up my throat. Did you sign anything? I asked. He shook his head. Not in front of God, no. I glanced at Ethan. His face didn't change, but his shoulders eased the tiniest degree. Grandpa, I said, I'm going to ask you to humor me. Can we record a message? Just you in your own words about what you want, not for the internet, for the truth. He looked past me out the window, where the winter sun was trying its best on a city that had learned to be unimpressed. I never liked cameras, he said. But I like you. We recorded in the kitchen. The light was good there, and the old clock ticked like a witness. Grandpa spoke slowly but clearly, naming me as the person he'd raised and the person he trusted. He said he didn't authorize any changes to the trust after his hospital stay, that he did not understand any amendment delivered without his chosen advisor, and that his intent was to leave me the house and a majority share of the savings, with bequests to charity and smaller sums to his other children. He ended by saying, if anyone watching this tries to dress their hunger in my name, I refuse the outfit. When the video stopped, my chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with loss and everything to do with love. We sent the recording to a secure drive. Ethan called Adult Protective Services and explained our concerns. They took his notes and opened a preliminary check. Then we called Grandpa's old friend Mrs. Alvarez, retired legal aide, sharper than any blade in my aunt's kitchen. She still had the original trust on file. If there's funny business, she said, we'll let the judge laugh last. By noon, a probate hold had been placed on major transactions pending review. You can't steal a car when the keys are in evidence. That evening, an email hit my inbox from Family Updates, which really meant my aunt behind a collective we. Family meeting at the house tomorrow, 5 p.m., to clarify minor misunderstandings related to legacy planning. Please be prompt. Minor misunderstandings. I wanted to bite through the phrase and spit out the bones. Do we go? Ethan asked. Oh, I said, and my voice was quiet enough to slice, we go. They staged it like a scene. My aunt at the head of the table with a leather folder like she invented organization. My uncle with folded arms, chin high. Cousin Becca pretending to be phone sick, thumb hovering above a blank screen. Mr. Coleman, family lawyer, smiling with all his teeth, as if we were the dessert course he'd already decided to skip. Grandpa wasn't there. He was resting, my aunt said, and something in me shrank and then stood up taller. We'll make this quick, my aunt began. Dad and I had a good talk about simplifying his affairs. He's comfortable. We've created a small, very small, adjustment to recognize everyone's contributions these last years. Nora, sweetheart, you've been such a help in spirit. In spirit, I said very softly. She blinked. Well, you know what I mean. I don't, I said and smiled. I've found that smiling while you remove a mask makes the ripping sound sweeter. Because groceries and doctor runs and mortgage payments usually count as more than spirit. Coleman cleared his throat. What your aunt means is. What he means, Ethan said, is the amendment you're about to present is notarized by a man who's been dead for 3 years. The pause lasted long enough for a lie to gestate. My aunt laughed first, short and bright. Oh, Ethan, always precise, it's a draft, that's all. Drafts don't get notarized, he said. Becca's eyes darted, exposed, then angry. My uncle leaned back and spread his hands like a referee who really wants to be a coach. Let's not turn a family matter into a witch hunt, he said. I'm not hunting, I said. I'm letting the witches speak. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and set it on the table. We brought something too, I added, a draft of Grandpa's voice. I pressed play. The kitchen light filled the room on the screen. The old clock ticked. Grandpa looked into the camera and spoke with the kind of clarity that makes liars squint. Halfway through, Coleman stood. His smile was gone. My aunt's hand froze on the folder as if she could put paper between us and the truth. Becca set her phone down like it had gotten heavy. When Grandpa said, "If anyone tries to dress their hunger in my name," my uncle swore under his breath. I paused the video. The clock on screen kept ticking in my head. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The probate freeze stays. Adult Protective Services has been notified. Mrs. Alvarez has filed a notice with the court that any amendment signed without her present is to be presumed invalid pending review. And I'm sending the notary record to the bar with a pleasant note about Mr. Coleman's persistent relationship with irregularities. Coleman's face tried on half a dozen expressions and returned to gray. "There's no need to escalate," he said. "Families solve things in-house." "You tried," I said, "and the house said no." My aunt's face trembled at the edges. "You ungrateful, after everything we've done." "You picked out a cake," I said. "I carried a life." Becca finally found words. "We were just trying to be fair," she snapped. "You don't get to hoard him." "I don't," I agreed. "I get to honor him. There's a difference." For a moment, the room tilted. Then Ethan slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts: the dead notary's obituary, the bar's letters, a timeline of Grandpa's hospital discharge, my bank statements with 3 years of mortgage payments labeled in black and white. Facts have a way of quieting performance. My uncle's mouth worked. Coleman reached for the folder like it might bite him. My aunt stared at me, eyes bright with a kind of grief I didn't recognize, grief not for a man, but for leverage. "You won't get away with this," she whispered. "You're right," I said. "I won't get away. I'll stay. I'll visit. I'll sit with him on Tuesdays and listen to the old stories about the Navy and the broken lawnmower he swore he'd fix until he was 95. You, on the other hand, might get away, if the court lets you." Ethan stood, "Meeting's over." As we left, Becca called after me, "You're making us look like villains." "You did that," I said. "I'm just turning on the light." For once, the consequences didn't arrive as fireworks. They came like winter, steadily, undeniably. The court rejected the amendment. Coleman was censured and then suspended for a year. He resigned 2 months later. Adult Protective Services found patterns suggestive of undue influence and referred my aunt and uncle to mediation and a financial monitor, think babysitter for bank accounts, with the option of charges if they resisted. They resisted, charges followed, quietly, no handcuffs in front of the neighbors, but the kind of trouble that moves zeros from hands that don't deserve them. Grandpa kept his house, his humor, and his Tuesdays with me. Sometimes when I'd make him tea, he'd tap the mug twice and say, "Blue is what we choose," and I'd swallow around the lump in my throat. He died 9 months later in his sleep, the way men who have already done the loudest part sometimes do. The service was small and exactly what he asked for: brass quartet, lemon bars, no speeches longer than a story. I brought the video but didn't play it. I didn't need to. The people in that room knew who he was and what he had refused to wear. The trust, his original, clean one, did what it was supposed to do. I kept the house. A scholarship fund went to the trade school he once mocked and then adored when he saw the first graduate buy her mother a car. My aunt and uncle received their bequests minus the fines they owed. Consequences have math. They don't ask if it's a good time. As for Becca, she DM'd me a paragraph that began with "I was just following mom's lead" and ended with "maybe coffee sometime." I didn't respond. My peace doesn't drink well with people who only find their conscience when the check comes. I sit on the back steps most evenings now, the ones Grandpa sanded smooth the year I outgrew fear but not splinters. I watch the neighbor's dog